Hey guys, thanks for clicking on this video. You have found the channel Mr. Articulate, where I post a video to YouTube of about 5 to 10 minutes in length each night. And my goal in the making of each video is to speak about whatever topic I am talking about in a very organized way so that I'm not simply saying a string of sentences that are all on the same topic, but actually giving a sense of cohesion to the sentences and the order that I am saying them in, so that I'm marshaling things and getting a beginning and a middle and an end. And that is all toward the long-term goal of just being a more articulate person in my life, my real life, so that I'm able to verbalize the reasons for believing the things that I believe, or the concepts that I need to comprehend at my job, whatever. So today's video will be a review of an op-ed that the economist Oren published on April 8th in the New York Times about the so-called Liberation Day tariffs that President Trump had rolled out right before Oren wrote that essay. So it's 4 days on from the day that the op-ed was published, and a lot of things have developed just since April 8th. So I'm definitely talking about something a bit outdated here, but nevertheless, that is what we're going to go through. So Cass is mostly, he analogizes the Liberation Day tariff announcements to D-Day at the beginning of the op-ed, in that this was the great move that President Trump was launching to reorder the international economic order, the international trade order, I should say, along new lines. And the reason he found D-Day to be a useful analogy is that we should remember that when the Allies successfully landed on Normandy, June 6th, 1944, and made a beachhead, that wasn't the end of the war in Europe. It was only the very, very beginning, and a lot of things still had to happen after D-Day for the Western side of the war to be done and dusted. And so this op-ed's not so much talking about the tariff policies that came out on Liberation Day, but how can the intentions that those tariffs represent be secured so that we actually do reorder international trade in the way that we want to. And so just to go through briefly, as Mr. Cass does, what has been implemented to date, or at any rate, what had been implemented as of April 8th. There is a 10% general tariff that simply applies to all imports to the United States from any country. There are much larger additional tariffs that are placed on Chinese imports into the United States. As of April 8th, I believe these tariffs were an additional 50% or so, but in the few days that have gone by since April 8th, those have gone up even more. And then the third thing is tariffs on each country of the world, apart from China, equal, or I should say, that are higher or lower in proportion to how large the trade deficit is between the United States and each given country. So Cass sees a lot that's promising here. Especially he likes, for starters, the 10% general tariff. That is something that he thinks should just be made into law by Congress and should be with us for the long haul, because the 10% general tariff is a great way for the United States to raise revenue, which can be useful in the really daunting task that we face over the next 30 to 40 years of getting our national debt under control. And it also is a small built-in support to U.S. domestic production over international production. So he likes that a lot. He likes the much higher tariff for China. And part of the reason for that, this is an interesting little nugget from the op-ed, I thought. The whole premise of free trade-ism as a practice and as an ideology is that open markets create the most prosperity for all participants in the open market. And so free trade will cultivate an international open market and be good for everybody. But a lot of countries in the world are not actually part of the open market. And the idea when in the 90s, we Western countries threw ourselves into the free trade policy mania that we've been governed by for the last 35 years. Part of the premise that when we launched into this was that all countries in the world who were not already open market countries would become open market. But that is not what has happened. China is not part of an open market. They do all sorts of things, which maybe would be a good topic for me to talk about in a future video. They do all kinds of things to favor their own domestic industries against industries from other countries. And the massive trade deficit that the U.S. has with China is not only caused by the fact that goods can be made so much cheaper in China than they can in the U.S. That's a huge part of it. I would assume the biggest part, but it's not the only part. There's all manner of things that the Chinese government does to manipulate the trade balance between our two countries to drive it in such extremity into China's favor and against our favor. So for that reason, China is reaping the benefits of an open market international order while not being an open market. We need to disentangle our American economy from the Chinese economy. And so Cass likes that as well. And then the third thing is interesting. Again, this op-ed was from April 8th. He said what he would like to see is for President Trump to announce a 6-month grace period for the tariffs that are being levied against every other country in the world, again, in proportion to how large the trade imbalance between America and that country is, so that individual countries can come to the table and converse with our State Department about how to remedy these trade imbalances. And sure enough, that announcement did come, I believe, within a day or two of the op-ed. So that's good. So in terms of my goal for these videos of marshaling what I wish to say and having an organized, coherent speech on whatever topic, this video I have failed rather badly in that because I still have not really even gotten into the main part of the op-ed, and I'm coming up on 9 minutes already. But again, the real point of Cass's op-ed is what things need to happen now for the next few months, next few years, whatever, to consolidate the impetus of Liberation Day into something that achieves, in reality, the desires that are animating what has happened so far. One of the things Cass emphasizes the most here is messaging. That if there are 2 or 3 main motivations behind these policies, President Trump's White House needs to articulate those very clearly. For one, the economic reliance we have on importing is a national security concern, because as a nation, we should not be beholden to foreign production for a lot of essential materials. So that is one. A second is so that this huge trade deficit can be ameliorated. And I'm sure there was one more. It's not coming to me though. But if we have coherent reasons, which a lot of important and influential people in the Trump White House do have coherent reasons, those need to be communicated. And another thing, and this one's really important, the whole point, well, as I was just saying, actually, there are multiple reasons why going into a new age of tariffs is a good thing, is a good idea. But if one of the main ones is to try to reindustrialize our own country and get back on our shores some of the industrial production that we lost starting in the 90s, the whole reason why tariffs can be useful to that end are that in domestic entrepreneurs will be incentivized to build factories because they'll know that in the marketplace they will have a huge leg up on foreign competitors because they won't be subject to tariffs. But it takes years to get an industrial concern off the ground. And entrepreneurs in our country are not going to rush to build industrial manufacturing ability on the premise that they will be able to succeed in a market-protected environment if they don't have any reason to think these tariffs are going to be here for the long haul. And if these tariffs only end up on the books via executive caveat, there's no good, strong reason to feel sure that come 2029, when a new president moves into the White House, that these tariffs won't be taken back off the books. And it's probably going to take almost until 2029 to really start seeing a strong industrial base grow in the U.S. So we need to make it a top priority to get these things enshrined in laws passed by Congress. And that's about all I've got. So I always, at the end, do a 3-part thing. First thing is to summarize in 1 or 2 sentences a main argument or a main idea of whatever I have read. In this case, I will say that I will go with kind of the last thing I said, which is those of us who believe that President Trump on Liberation Day was striking the first blow in a battle that will be good for all Americans if we can win it, we need to have a focus on getting these tariffs enshrined in congressional law. An example of that, it's funny, I just remembered another thing Cass said going forward and this is going to need to be Congress again too. Congress is going to need to make a lot of measures that will support and supercharge the speed with which America can reindustrialize. And he used the CHIPS Act, which has been very successful in the semiconductor industry, as an example. We need things like the CHIPS Act for a bunch of different industries. So I'll make that my example, that Congress needs to supercharge the reshoring of industrial jobs through legislation that will support domestic industry. And then how to apply this main idea to something in the world or something else that I already know. I know that the last few presidential administrations, starting, I think President Obama really kicked this into high gear, although I could be wrong about that, but more and more in the 21st century, presidents have effected their will via executive orders rather than securing victories in Congress. And that, on the one hand, is a nice workaround to the paralysis that Capitol Hill exists in now. But on the other, it means that we whiplash back and forth every time a president of a new party comes into the White House, because all the executive orders of the previous president get reversed almost immediately. So we have seen that phenomenon play out with Obama's executive orders once Trump took over, Biden's once he took over from Trump, and then Trump again when he took over from Biden. So if, say, J.D. Vance becomes our next president, a lot of the stuff that is just executive actions right now will be preserved. But if our Republican candidate in 2029 loses, then we are going to lose Liberation Day and all the developments that come after it if we don't have legislative victories. So that's it. Definitely not my best video, but if you somehow fell asleep or something and you woke up and you're still watching this video now, then thank you for sticking through to the end. I will be back tomorrow night, most likely, maybe tonight, but probably tomorrow, with another video. And I hope that you have a good rest of your day or night, depending on what time it is when you watch.